The hum of fluorescent lights overhead was the only constant in Operating Theater 3 of St. Vincent's Hospital, Boston. The hour was just past midnight, the air thick with antiseptic and adrenaline. Dr. Mara Ellison, head of trauma surgery and veteran of hundreds of emergency procedures, felt a familiar calm settle over her as she stared down at the pale, battered figure on the table. 48-year-old male, Nurse Patel recited from the chart. Found unconscious in an alley near South Harbor. Massive blunt trauma to the chest, suspected internal bleeding, unknown medical history. Vitals, Mara asked, slipping on her gloves. BP 80 over 40 and dropping, pulse erratic. Let's move, scalpel. The blade sliced cleanly into flesh, muscle, and tissue, a choreography Mara had long since memorized. She worked quickly but methodically, her mind compartmentalizing each step. The patient was unconscious, barely clinging to life. His body told a story of hardship, old surgical scars crisscrossing his abdomen, needle tracks on his forearms, and a tattoo half burned away by what looked like acid. Whoever he was, he'd lived through hell and might not survive the night. Clamp, retractor, suction, she ordered, her voice steady, controlled. Around her, the OR team responded in seamless rhythm. And then something caught her eye. It was a flash of metallic reflection deep within the abdominal cavity, wedged between the liver and the diaphragm. Mara frowned. Foreign objects were not uncommon, bullets, shrapnel, even swallowed coins, but this was none of those. It looked too rectangular, too deliberate. Hold suction, she murmured, leaning closer. What is that? The surgical lights glinted off the object again. With a pair of forceps, she reached in delicately and tugged. It came free with a soft click against the metal instrument. The room fell silent. In her gloved hands lay a laminated hospital ID card, its surface sticky with blood but surprisingly intact. For a moment, Mara could only stare, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. What is that? Patel whispered again, voice trembling now. Mara turned the card over. The name printed across the top was crisp, bold, impossible to misread, and it hit her like a physical blow. Dr. Simon Alcott. Her hands froze. The sound of the heart monitor, the hiss of the ventilator, the murmur of the nurses, it all faded into a distant hum. The name was seared into her mind, dredging up memories she had spent 5 long years trying to bury. Simon Alcott, her mentor, her closest friend, the man who had once told her she'd be the future of medicine and who had vanished without a trace in 2012. Mara remembered the day he disappeared, as if it were a wound carved into her timeline. It was a cold April evening. Simon had been scheduled to speak at a medical ethics conference, but he never arrived. His apartment was untouched. His passport, wallet, and car were all accounted for. The police found no evidence of foul play. He had simply walked out of St. Vincent's and dissolved into thin air. For weeks, Mara had barely slept. She had helped detectives comb through hours of security footage, interviewed every colleague, every patient. Nothing. Eventually, the investigation had been declared inactive. The case faded from headlines. People moved on. But not her. She couldn't. Simon wasn't just a colleague. He was the reason she was a surgeon at all. And the last conversation they'd had still haunted her. There's something rotten here, Mara, he'd told her in a whisper outside the scrub room days before he vanished. Something beneath the surface. If anything happens to me, don't believe what they tell you. And now, 5 years later, his hospital ID, the one she'd watched security deactivate, was sitting in her blood-stained hands, pulled from the body cavity of a stranger. It was impossible, and yet it was real. Bag this for evidence, Mara said quietly, handing the card to Patel, who sealed it in a sterile container. She forced herself to refocus on the patient. We'll deal with it after surgery. Right now he lives. But the ID burned in her mind like a brand. 2 hours later, the surgery ended. Against all odds, the man survived, though he remained unconscious, his blood pressure barely holding. Mara peeled off her gloves and scrubbed out, her hands trembling slightly under the faucet. She'd seen strange things in her career, but nothing like this. The hospital's security director arrived first, followed by 2 detectives. Mara explained what had happened, her words sounding distant even to her own ears. One of the detectives, Alan Reese, was a familiar face, a seasoned investigator with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too much. He had worked Simon Alcott's disappearance back in 2012. You found this inside him? Reese asked, holding the sealed evidence bag to the light. Wedged behind the diaphragm, Mara said. No signs of recent surgery but the scars. Whoever this man is, he's been opened up before, multiple times. Reese stared at the card for a long time. We checked every lead on Alcott. If he was alive, we'd know. Mara met his gaze. Maybe we missed something. Or maybe someone wants you to think he's alive. The words sent a chill down her spine. Reese flipped his notebook closed. We'll run forensics on the ID, DNA, prints, everything. In the meantime, stay reachable, Dr. Ellison. If there's more to this, you'll hear from me. Hours later, Mara found herself sitting in the dim light of the ICU, staring at the unconscious man. The rhythmic beep-beep of his heart monitor was the only sound in the room. Who was he? How had he come to swallow, or more likely, have implanted, Simon Alcott's ID? And why? As she studied him, a nurse's voice cut through her thoughts. Doctor, he's waking up. Mara stood quickly. The man's eyes fluttered, pupils darting beneath half-closed lids. His lips parted, dry and cracked. She leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. Can you hear me? Do you know your name? No response. Do you know how this got inside you? She pressed, holding up a photo of the ID. His gaze shifted toward it. Recognition? Fear? It was impossible to tell. He tried to speak, his throat rasping as he forced out broken words. He's still, he coughed, his body trembling under the strain. Cutting. Myra's heart skipped. Who's cutting? His eyes rolled back, and with one final breath, he murmured, under the chapel. The heart monitor spiked into chaos. He's coding, shouted a nurse. Myra jumped into action, initiating compressions, calling for epinephrine, but it was too late. The man's pulse flatlined. Time of death, 3:14 a.m. Myra stepped back, her hands slick with sweat despite the gloves. The room was silent again, heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. Under the chapel. The words echoed in her mind like a sinister lullaby. By dawn, Myra was still at the hospital, staring out a window overlooking the city. Boston was waking up, taxis honking, lights flickering on in high-rises, but her world had narrowed to a single point of obsession. 5 years ago, she had failed him. She had failed to see the signs, failed to protect him, failed to find him. Now she felt the faintest pulse of hope, or maybe it was dread. Either way, it was impossible to ignore. She pulled the sealed evidence bag from her coat pocket and stared again at the ID. A faint smudge near the edge caught her eye, surgical ink, faded but distinct. And beneath it, carved so faintly it was nearly invisible, a sequence of numbers, 14-10-17. October 14th, 3 days from now. Her breath caught. It wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't a random artifact trapped inside a stranger's body. It was a breadcrumb, a message, maybe even a warning. Under the chapel, she whispered to herself, her eyes drifting to the silhouette of St. Mary's Chapel, just visible across the river. It had once belonged to the hospital, but had been sealed off years ago after a fire, a place where no one was supposed to go. A place Simon Alcott had once called his quiet space. The beginning. As the morning sun rose over the city, Mara Ellison knew two things with absolute certainty. First, the story of Simon Alcott was far from over. Second, whatever lay buried beneath that chapel was the key to everything. And this time, she swore, she would not stop until she uncovered the truth, even if it meant tearing open every hidden wound the past had left behind. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. His fingers trembled above the console, unsure whether to cut the power to the net or attempt some more delicate maneuver. The canyon walls, jagged and dark under Barron's pale sunlight, seemed to close in around him. The wind whistled sharply through the narrow gorge, sending clouds of glassy sand into his eyes. Suspended in the shimmering net, the vulpine woman stared at him. Her fur was a burnished copper, long and sleek, reflecting the dim glow of his equipment. Her amber eyes glowed with intelligence and rage, scanning his every motion. Each flick of her tail was a whip of fury, a subtle warning of the strength she possessed. Her claws scraped the energy mesh, sending sparks dancing across the canyon floor. "You trapped me," she hissed, fangs gleaming, "for your experiments." Ethan's brain raced. I didn't mean to. I was aiming for small fauna, less intelligent, less yelling." Her glare sharpened, ears twitching. "Do not lie to me, human. You know exactly what you have done." Ethan swallowed, shifting on unsteady feet. "I swear I didn't. You're not the fox. I didn't expect you. Please just calm down, okay?" She flinched as if the concept of calm was foreign to her. "I am no mere animal," she growled. "Release me, human, or you will answer to the Vulpine clans." Ethan froze. He had heard whispers about the Vulpines, stories passed along by distant colonies. A warrior race, legendary for ruthlessness, their honor absolute, their retribution immediate and merciless. To catch one, by accident or not, was beyond dangerous. It was suicide. I don't want to fight you," he said carefully, hands raised. "I have nothing against your people, I'm just studying life here." Her amber eyes narrowed. "Studying?" she spat. "Do you study stars by breaking them apart? Do you understand what it means to capture a sentient being?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I didn't think. I was trying to learn. I was trying to survive my own loneliness." For a moment her expression flickered between rage and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Her tail lashed sharply, creating a rhythm of tension that matched the thrum of his own heartbeat. "You are strange, human," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Most of my people would have killed you already or left me to die, yet you hesitate. Why?" Ethan rubbed his neck. "Maybe because I know what it's like to feel trapped, to be misunderstood." Her ears twitched. "Misunderstood?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, trying to dissect his words. "You speak oddly, yet I sense no immediate threat. Why?" "Because I've been alone for too long," Ethan admitted, his voice dropping. "You may be stronger, faster, deadlier, but you're also alone here, aren't you? And maybe we both need someone to understand us." For a moment, silence stretched across the canyon. The net shimmered, suspending her effortlessly, but the tension between them had shifted. It was no longer predator versus prey. It was a standoff of wills, of curiosity, of fragile understanding. Then a distant hum reached their ears, a sound that made both of them tense. Ethan recognized it immediately, a Vulpine patrol ship descending toward the canyon. Its hull glinted in the sun, and he could hear the low vibrations of its engines cutting through the thin air. The Vulpine were coming. Sarah stiffened, tail lashing violently. "They are fast. Faster than you can imagine," she said, voice low but edged with alarm. "They will arrive before dawn, and when they do, they will not care whether you trapped me by accident or design. They will see your actions as betrayal." Ethan's mind raced. He had no backup, no allies on Baron, nothing but his wits, his meager equipment, and Captain Caffeine. "Then we improvise," he said, voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "We need a plan to buy time, just enough to explain, maybe." Her amber eyes flicked to him, scrutinizing every nuance of expression. "Explain, humans explain, to my people, you are foolish." "Perhaps," he admitted, "but I also survive by improvising. It's what humans do best. We make mistakes, adapt, and survive." A faint spark jumped from the console as Ethan tapped a wire, rerouting the energy that powered the net. He needed the Vulpine patrol to arrive after he had prepared his defenses, not before. One misstep, and both of them would die. Sarah watched him closely, tail flicking slowly now, claws flexing against the net. "You trust me, human?" she asked cautiously. "I have to," he said. "And I think maybe you can trust me too. I didn't catch you because of malice. I didn't come here to fight. I'm alone, just like you." For the first time, she seemed to consider it. Her ears twitched in a subtle display of thought, tail coiling as she tested the limits of the energy field. "You are not like other humans," she said finally. "I expected deceit, aggression, violence. Instead, I find hesitation and curiosity." Ethan's lips twitched into a faint, wry smile. "Curiosity is what keeps me alive. Well, that and caffeine." He lifted Captain Caffeine in a small gesture of humor. A brief, almost imperceptible sound came from behind, a shift in the sand. The patrol ship was closer. Its massive shadow cut across the canyon walls, and Ethan realized they had mere minutes. Sarah's eyes narrowed again, amber fire blazing. "If they arrive while you dally, human, I cannot protect you, and they will not protect me. Do you understand?" "I understand," Ethan said, hands already moving across the console. "Then we fight smart, not strong, and maybe kindness and cleverness are our best weapons." She studied him, ears flicking, tail lashing with tension. Her fangs gleamed in the dim light, and for the first time she allowed a hint of trust to mingle with her suspicion. "Very well, human, but know this, I will test your claims. One false move and this canyon becomes your grave." Ethan swallowed, pulse hammering, but he nodded. "Deal, let's hope we survive the night." The wind howled. The patrol ship's shadow crept closer. The canyon seemed to shrink around them, tension thick as molten metal. And as the first searchlights glinted across the shimmering net, Ethan realized that this moment, this fragile trust between human and vulpine, would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The night on Barren had begun, and for the first time, Ethan understood that the greatest danger wasn't just the patrol. It was the unknown, the unpredictable mind of an alien warrior, and the fragile bridge of trust he had just begun to build. The hum of the canyon seemed to settle into an uneasy rhythm, punctuated by the occasional crackle of the energy net. Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment press down on him. He had captured Sarah, a vulpine warrior, stronger, faster, and far more dangerous than anything he had encountered on Barren. And yet, despite all the danger, he felt an unfamiliar impulse rise, not fear, but empathy. He reached toward a small thermos he kept near the console, the chipped ceramic mug capped in caffeine perched loyally beside it. He began cautiously, I can't undo the trap, but maybe I can offer a gesture. Sarah's ears twitched, sharp and alert, her tail whipping in irritation. A gesture, human, what do you mean? Tea, Ethan said simply, lifting the thermos and holding it carefully. It's a human thing. We drink it to calm tension, to share time. Breakfast diplomacy, I call it. Her head tilted sharply, amber eyes narrowing. Breakfast diplomacy? You dare offer prey something to drink instead of attack. Not prey, Ethan said quickly. Not you, just tea. He poured a small cup and let the steam rise between them, carrying the faint aroma of herbs and warmth. It's harmless, mostly. She sniffed the air cautiously, claws hovering over the shimmering mesh. And why would you offer this? Because humans survive by confusing danger with kindness, Ethan said, shrugging slightly. We improvise, we adapt. We try to turn fear into conversation rather than claws and weapons. Sarah's tail lashed sharply, still tense, yet her ears twitched with what seemed like reluctant curiosity. Conversation is a weapon. Sometimes, Ethan said with a faint grin. The sharpest one you'll ever face isn't made of metal. It's made of patience, timing, and trust. Works better than blades, in my experience. The vulpine woman stared at him, fangs glinting, muscles taut. Then, tentatively, she extended a delicate paw and sniffed the rising steam. Her nose twitched, inhaling the warmth. Her amber eyes flicked to Ethan, measuring, calculating. You are odd, human, she said softly. Most humans I've encountered, they kill first, ask questions never. Ethan shrugged. Well, I'm not most humans, I prefer not to die. Her eyes flicked to the approaching canyon walls, where shadows stretched long under Barren's pale sunlight. The hum of distant engines vibrated through the sands. The vulpine patrol was near. They will arrive soon, she said, voice low and urgent. You realize this gesture may not save you from my people's wrath. I know, Ethan admitted, but maybe it can save us from immediate death, just a moment to understand each other before they arrive. She regarded him silently for several heartbeats, tail flicking with nervous energy. Then slowly she brought the cup to her lips. The warmth flowed through her, alien and disorienting, and she blinked, surprised. A sensation of calm, curiosity, something entirely new washed over her. This is poison, isn't it? She asked, voice trembling slightly. Ethan chuckled, tapping the mug lightly. Only if you add too much sugar, and maybe in large quantities it can make humans hyperactive, otherwise harmless. She narrowed her eyes, still suspicious, yet her posture softened. You offer me comfort while I am captive. Most species, humans included, would exploit weakness. Maybe, Ethan said, voice quiet. Or maybe we survive because we notice it. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is give someone a choice instead of a trap. Sarah's ears twitched as she considered this. For a vulpine, choice was a weakness to exploit. Power was enforced through fear, obedience, and tradition. And yet, here was this human, sitting cross-legged, offering warmth instead of death, words instead of weapons. You confuse me, she admitted finally. I expected torment. I find curiosity and tea instead. That's humanity, Ethan said softly. We make mistakes, we improvise, and sometimes we survive because of it. She tilted her head, amber eyes flicking to the horizon, ears twitched again. Your people do not survive through force alone. No, he said. We survive because we adapt, because we empathize. Sometimes kindness is stronger than claws. A faint rumble drew their attention to the approaching patrol. The searchlights cut through the mist, painting the canyon floor with harsh red and silver. Sarah's tail flicked violently, and instinct sharpened her senses. "They are close," she said, voice tense. "Too close, you must prepare, or we will not survive this night." Ethan nodded, fingers already moving across the console. "I know, but first, tea, because survival without patience is just a rush to death." Sarah blinked at him, almost incredulous. "You human, you offer calm before battle? Madness." "Or genius," Ethan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Depends on perspective." She allowed herself a quiet chuckle, a sound like wind over copper sand, hesitant but genuine. Her tail flicked once, slower now, the tension easing just slightly. "Your methods are incomprehensible, yet effective." Ethan glanced at her, reading the subtle shifts in posture, tail, and ear. "Trust me, Sarah, or don't, but we only have one shot to survive together, and right now, patience, conversation, and yes, tea are our best weapons." She leaned closer, cautiously, amber eyes studying his face. "I do not fully understand your species," she said, voice soft. "But I feel something strange, safety, and curiosity. Perhaps this is the first step toward understanding." Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Then let's take that step, one cup at a time." The canyon wind blew, carrying dust, distant hums, and the faintest hint of Barren's metallic flora. Sarah's ears flicked, tail swaying, muscles taut yet attentive. And as the hum of the approaching patrol grew louder, the two of them, human and vulpine, sat together, sharing warmth, curiosity, and the fragile beginnings of trust. For the first time that night, Ethan felt a sliver of hope. But in the shadows above, the vulpine patrol descended, engines thrumming like a heartbeat. And somewhere deep inside, both human and vulpine knew that tea and trust might buy them a moment. But the coming confrontation would test the limits of every choice, every act of compassion, and every ounce of ingenuity they had to offer. The night on Barren was far from over. The canyon walls of Barren shivered under the distant hum of the approaching vulpine patrol ship. Its engines droned low, metallic and unyielding, cutting through the thin alien air like a blade. Ethan's fingers hovered over the control console, sweat prickling his temples. The net hummed faintly, keeping Sarah suspended, but it was a fragile line of containment. One wrong move, one miscalculated command, and it could fail. Sarah's tail lashed sharply, striking a rock with a precise warning snap. Her amber eyes glowed with a mixture of suspicion and urgency. "They will not hesitate," she said quietly. "My people will assume your actions are deliberate. Even now, their sensors are scanning this canyon." Ethan swallowed hard, scanning the network of wires and sensors he had strung across the canyon floor. Most of them were meant to monitor nocturnal fox-like fauna, but the vulpine systems were sensitive, intricate, and fast-adapting. He had spent the last 3 years alone in the desert hunting his knowledge of Barren's wildlife, but the vulpine were something else entirely, predators in both mind and body. "They'll see the net and they'll see you," Ethan muttered, running his hands along the wires. "And they'll assume the worst. They always assume the worst." Sarah's ears twitched, the slightest ripple of tension traveling down her spine. "Your species, you improvise under pressure?" she asked. "Even when the stakes are your life?" "I have to," Ethan said softly. "Improvisation is what keeps humans alive. Brains, curiosity, compassion. Sometimes that's all we have against claws, teeth, and tradition." He tapped a few wires, sending sparks flickering along the mesh. "And sometimes it's enough to confuse them, buy us time." Her amber eyes narrowed as she regarded him, tail coiled defensively. "You risk everything for me, and yet you are not compelled by orders, law, or self-interest." "No," he said, voice firm. "Just survival, and maybe something else. Sometimes humans survive by caring, not by fighting. It's dangerous, but it works more often than you'd think." The patrol's shadow lengthened across the canyon, and Ethan felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. The vulpine vessel was vast, a dark monolith, scanning everything below with intelligent precision. Drones detached from the main hull, moving ahead of the ship, their sensors slicing through the mist and sand. "They will sweep the canyon," Sarah warned. "And they will find evidence of your net. They may not forgive it." Ethan nodded. "Then we make them think what they see is something else. We disguise our trail, misdirect their sensors. It's trickery, human trickery." He tapped a series of commands into his console, rerouting the net's energy field to emit false heat and motion signatures. Sparks arced as the system responded, the net flickering as though alive. Sarah observed silently, her tail lashing with restrained tension. "You are clever," she admitted, voice low. Perhaps more clever than I anticipated, but cleverness alone will not save you if they arrive first. Ethan exhaled sharply. I know, but cleverness plus patience, maybe. He moved to the edge of the canyon floor, glancing at the incoming drones. They scanned systematically, lights cutting harsh red stripes across the jagged rock. One drone hovered closer, sensors glowing, and Ethan quickly adjusted the wiring to generate a phantom heat signature behind a boulder. The drone paused, its lights flickering, scanning an empty patch of sand. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Ingenious, she murmured. Your species does not fight like mine. You outthink, confuse, manipulate perception, dangerous and unusual. Ethan allowed himself a small smile, though his heart was racing. Sometimes dangerous is better than dead. The Vulpine ship descended further, engines humming low. The drones spread, scanning every crevice of the canyon. Ethan's fingers flew over the console, rerouting power to different sections of the net, creating multiple false readings. Sparks hissed and arced along the cables, but the system held. Sarah's tail flicked in approval, or perhaps in disbelief. You are mad, she said softly. Or brave or foolish, perhaps all three. I'll take brave, Ethan said, voice low. But mostly I just don't want to die tonight. A faint red light blinked across the canyon wall. The drone's sensors had locked onto one of the false signals. Ethan quickly redirected it, sending a pulse along another wire to simulate movement. The drone shifted, following the phantom target. You manipulate their senses with little more than wires and light, Sarah observed, tone impressed. Your species is unpredictable, hazardous. Ethan laughed quietly. Unpredictable is another word for alive, I think. He glanced at her, reading the tension in her posture, the subtle twitches of her ears, the flick of her tail. And alive is exactly what we need right now. The canyon trembled slightly as the main patrol ship adjusted its orbit, scanning more aggressively. Red beams danced across the rocks, and Ethan realized their time was almost up. One miscalculation, one failure, and the Vulpine would see the net, and him, and everything would escalate into war. Sarah's eyes flicked to him. I do not know if I trust your species fully, she said, voice quiet, but I trust your actions for the moment. That's all I need, Ethan said. Just a little trust, enough to survive the next few minutes. He pressed another button, activating a secondary pulse. The net shimmered, producing a cascading sequence of energy pulses, creating false heat signatures and decoy movements across the canyon. The drones responded, scanning, hovering, and then chasing phantoms. Sarah's tail flicked slowly, then coiled around itself as she regarded him. Your methods confound me, yet they are effective. Perhaps your species has a form of strength we do not understand. Ethan nodded, fingers still flying across the console. Strength is not always muscle and claws. Sometimes it's empathy, improvisation, and courage under pressure. The patrol ship shifted, sensing something was amiss. Drones began to converge on the canyon floor where the real energy readings were weakest. Ethan redirected the signals again, sweat dripping from his brow. Sarah crouched beside him, tail coiling tightly. If they detect us, if they realize the deception, death will come swiftly. You understand this, human? I understand, Ethan said, and I accept it. Sometimes survival requires risk, and sometimes saving someone else is worth the gamble. For the first time, she allowed herself a flicker of trust, tail brushing lightly against his leg. You are strange, and yet I do not feel immediate fear. Ethan glanced at the approaching patrol, then at Sarah. Then let's use that, together, improvisation and patience. That's our only chance. A sharp vibration ran through the canyon floor as a drone hovered directly over the net. Ethan's fingers flew, rerouting the energy field, sending a false reading toward a cluster of rocks. The drone tilted, paused, and then pivoted, chasing the phantom signal. Sarah's ears flicked, tail twitching, her gaze sharp and calculating. Perhaps you are more dangerous than your weapons suggest, human. Survival may favor you. Ethan exhaled, allowing a small smile. Sometimes kindness, ingenuity, and a little luck are stronger than fear. The canyon walls seemed to shrink around them as the main patrol descended further, lights cutting across the floor. Ethan and Sarah crouched together, allies in an uneasy, fragile truce. Above, the Vulpine commander's shadow loomed, engines humming, scanning, calculating. And somewhere deep inside, both human and Vulpine realized the night on Baron had shifted. They were no longer predator and prey. They were partners against an unseen enemy, relying on trust, ingenuity, and a fragile bridge of understanding that could shatter at any misstep. The canyon had fallen into an uneasy stillness after the last diversion of the Vulpine patrol drones. Their searchlights had swept past the net without detecting Ethan or Sarah, thanks to a careful series of energy pulses and false signals. Sparks from the console flickered in the dim light, reflecting off Sarah's copper fur in jagged streaks. Despite the temporary lull, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on both of them. Sarah crouched beside him, tail coiled low, eyes flicking warily to the shadows. "They are clever," she admitted quietly, voice like wind over glassy sand. "Faster than any hunter I've faced on my world. You survived them." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, scanning the canyon floor. "We survive by thinking ahead, by improvising, by being unpredictable. Sometimes that's all we've got." He glanced at the net, shimmering faintly in the low light. "And right now, we've got each other." Her amber eyes narrowed, tail flicking in tension. "We trust each other?" she asked softly, a note of incredulity in her tone. "You know nothing of my people, and yet you risk yourself for me." Ethan paused, considering how much to reveal. "I don't know your people, and I don't understand all the customs. But I do know this: if I leave you to fight them alone, neither of us survives. Trust isn't about certainty. It's about choosing someone else over yourself, even when the odds are stacked against you." Sarah's tail lashed sharply, claws scraping the canyon floor. Her ears twitched in rapid, subtle movements, scanning, calculating. "My species, we do not offer trust lightly. One mistake can cost entire clans. And yet here I am, suspended in a net, listening to your words. I feel something strange. Curiosity, perhaps even hope." Ethan allowed himself a small, wry smile. "Hope is underrated and dangerous, but right now it's our weapon." The hum of the approaching Vulpine patrol reminded them that there was no time for philosophical debates. The drones were clever, their sensors fast adapting. Ethan's mind raced, fingers flying over the console. He rerouted energy pulses, created phantom heat signatures, and simulated movement across the canyon floor. The drones paused, hesitated, and then followed false signals, buying precious seconds. Sarah watched in silent fascination. "Your methods, they are unlike anything my species teaches. We rely on strength, speed, and intimidation. You manipulate perception. You fight with illusion." "Perception is a weapon," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes the sharpest blade is the one they don't see coming." He glanced at Sarah. "But it only works if we trust each other." Her ears flicked, tail twitching, eyes narrowing as she considered him. "And if your trust is misplaced?" "Then we die," he admitted. "But even dying together beats dying alone." For a long moment the canyon echoed with silence. The wind whipped through the narrow gorge, carrying dust and the faint scent of Barren's metallic flora. Sarah's muscles tensed and relaxed repeatedly, a predator weighing options. Then, with a subtle flick of her tail, she released a small measure of tension. "You are not like the humans I was warned of," she said, voice low. "You are reckless, and yet there is something admirable in your actions, perhaps even frightening." Ethan chuckled quietly. "I'll take frightening over dead, it suits me." They crouched together, side by side, two unlikely allies in a canyon of glassy sand and jagged cliffs. Ethan kept glancing at the patrol's approach, mapping the drone's positions and calculating each next move. He could feel Sarah observing him, studying his reactions, learning, adapting. Her eyes flicked from his hands to the console, then to his expression. "You speak of trust," she said after a long pause. "And yet in your species it seems fragile. Words cannot bind loyalty, actions do. You have acted, and now I consider you worthy of it, perhaps even a companion." Ethan's heart skipped. Companion? It was the closest acknowledgement of equality he could imagine from a Vulpine warrior. "I'm glad you think so," he said softly. "I'm not used to getting that kind of vote of confidence from someone with claws that could tear me apart in seconds." A subtle shift in the wind made them both turn. The patrol had adjusted its approach, engines thrumming with intelligent calculation. The drones were converging, adjusting patterns. Ethan tapped the console, redirecting the energy net, producing additional false heat signatures and drawing some drones away from their position. "Your species survives through ingenuity, not brute force," Sarah murmured, tail flicking slowly. "Dangerous and perplexing." "I'll take that as a compliment," Ethan said, trying to inject a bit of levity into the tense moment. "Most of the time, my survival depends on not being predictable." Her ears twitched. And yet here you are, predictable enough to draw me into trust, but unpredictable enough to evade my people. A paradox. Ethan shrugged. Paradox is sometimes the only path forward when the universe hands you predators on both sides. The first drone hovered dangerously close, sensors sweeping. Ethan's fingers danced over the console, rerouting pulses, activating phantom movements that lured it toward a false target. Sparks hissed as energy arced along the wires. The drone paused, tilted, and then pivoted, chasing the illusion. Sarah's amber eyes glimmered. I am learning, and yet I remain wary. The canyon is not safe. Your species is fascinating, but fragile. And yours is terrifying, Ethan said, voice low. But fragile too, and right now that fragility works in our favor. She tilted her head, studying him. Your logic, it is strange, yet effective. Perhaps I can trust your strategy for the moment. Ethan exhaled, feeling a small surge of relief. That's all we need. One moment, just enough to survive and maybe understand each other. The canyon floor rumbled faintly. The patrol's main ship adjusted its position, and red searchlights swept across the canyon. Ethan activated a new energy pulse, sending a false heat signature up a narrow crevice. Drones followed, leaving their true location untouched. Sarah's tail twitched, her stance alert but less rigid. Your ingenuity is unsettling, yet survival may favor you. Perhaps this is why humans endure in the galaxy despite weakness. Ethan smiled faintly. Sometimes it's not about being strong. Sometimes it's about patience, trust, and knowing when to act. For the first time that night, Sarah allowed a subtle shift in posture, tail curling near Ethan's leg. It was a gesture of trust, tiny but unmistakable. Perhaps there is a lesson here. Not all predators attack. Not all humans kill. Some survive differently. And we can use that, Ethan said, to survive tonight and maybe more than that. The canyon seemed to shrink around them, tension hanging thick in the air. The patrol's hum grew louder, engines vibrating through the ground. Drones adjusted their patterns, hunting in on phantom signals. Ethan's fingers flew across the console, rerouting energy pulses, keeping the deception alive. Sarah's amber eyes lingered on him, curious and wary. You risk yourself repeatedly, and yet I do not feel fear, only anticipation. Perhaps this is what you call human ingenuity. Ethan shrugged, feeling the sweat on his brow. Maybe, or maybe it's just stubbornness and a little caffeine. He lifted Captain Caffeine from the console, tapping the chipped mug gently. Would you like some? For morale. Sarah's tail twitched once, almost imperceptibly. A gesture of amusement, perhaps. Your species is unlike anything I expected, she said softly. Perhaps there is hope in this alliance, fragile but hope nonetheless. Ethan nodded. Fragile hope is better than certainty of death. And as the first Vulpine patrol drones began to converge on the canyon floor again, human and Vulpine crouched side by side. Improvising, trusting, surviving. The fragile bond between them, their first real connection, was about to be tested in ways neither could yet imagine. The night on Baron had shifted. They were no longer predator and prey. They were allies, walking the thin line between survival and annihilation, and the bridge of trust they had begun to build would determine not just their fate, but perhaps the fate of both species. The Vulpine patrol's shadow stretched across the jagged canyon, engines humming like a pulse of living metal. Red searchlights flickered, cutting across the glassy sand, illuminating the twisted rocks and the shimmering energy net. Ethan's pulse thudded painfully in his chest. He crouched beside the console, fingers flying over wires, rerouting energy, redirecting pulses to create phantom heat signatures. Every second counted. One miscalculation and the Vulpine would detect them both. Sarah landed lightly beside him, tail coiling in tension. Her amber eyes scanned the shadows above, reading the subtle shifts in the drone's patterns. They are organized, she whispered, voice sharp and low. Faster than any predators I have faced. They will arrive at the canyon floor in moments. You are reckless, human. Maybe, Ethan admitted, voice steady though sweat ran down his temple. But reckless is sometimes the only way to survive. Improvisation and calculation, human strengths, they rely on predictability. We don't have to. She studied him, tail flicking once, ears swiveling. You trust me, and yet you manipulate the very tools of my people against them. Foolish, and yet admirable. Ethan's lips curved in a wry smile. Call it a gamble, but one worth taking. The first drone skimmed low, sensors sweeping with mechanical precision. Ethan pressed a button, sending a pulse along the net's energy field. Sparks hissed and danced across the canyon floor. Phantom heat signatures flared, drawing the drones toward jagged rocks and barren stretches of sand. The drones paused, hesitated, then shifted, following false signals. Sarah's tail flicked in approval. Clever, using their own senses against them, deception as weapon, dangerous and effective. Ethan nodded, keeping his eyes on the approaching patrol. Sometimes cleverness and trust work better than claws and teeth. The drones continued to adjust, sensing anomalies, their sensors scanning every inch of canyon floor. Ethan's fingers moved faster, redirecting pulses, creating multiple decoys. Sparks arced from the console, the mesh net shivering with energy. Sarah crouched, muscles coiled and ready, her eyes narrowed. "They will adapt quickly," she warned. "You must anticipate their moves, human, or we die." "I know," Ethan said, glancing at her. "And that's why I need you. Your instincts, your reflexes. Together we can outthink them." The patrol's main ship descended, engines vibrating through the canyon. Red and white lights swept across rocks, sand, and the shimmering net. Ethan activated a secondary pulse, sending a wave across the canyon floor. Drones shifted, colliding with shadows, chasing phantom heat readings. One spun midair, crashing into a boulder, scattering shards of rock. Sarah's fangs gleamed as she observed. "Your species fights not with force but with perception, dangerous and fascinating." "Sometimes kindness is a weapon too," Ethan said softly, leaning close to her. "I didn't catch you to harm you, I caught you by mistake, but my goal now is to survive it together." Her tail twitched uncertainly. "You are strange, human, reckless, yet I feel safer here than I would with my own kind." The ship's engines roared louder and more drones swept low across the canyon floor. Ethan tapped the console again, redirecting pulses, generating decoys. Sparks shot from wires, crackling through the canyon like tiny lightning storms. He could feel the vibration of the ship through his boots, the steady hum of energy filling his ears. "Time is short," Sarah said, voice tight. "We must act before they locate the true energy signature. Your ingenuity alone will not be enough." Ethan's mind raced. He scanned the console, mapping the drone positions, recalculating their approach. "We combine strategies," he said. "We improvise, we mislead, and we act when the window opens," and he gestured toward her, amber eyes shining in the dim light. "We trust each other, that's our edge." Sarah's tail flicked, ears flattened. "Trust, alien concept, yet perhaps the only thing that can save us now." He nodded. "Exactly." They moved in tandem, human and vulpine, crouching behind rocks, redirecting pulses and creating false trails. Ethan's hands moved with precision over the console, Sarah's claws activating nearby wiring to amplify energy pulses. Sparks arced into the canyon air, casting flickering shadows on their faces. The first drone descended directly toward their position. Ethan's pulse device surged, sending a false reading into the canyon floor. The drone hesitated, sensors struggling to differentiate reality from illusion. Sarah lunged, claws slashing through the air, severing a secondary wire to amplify the pulse. The drone spun uncontrollably and crashed into the canyon wall. "Effective teamwork," she muttered, tail lashing in satisfaction. Ethan allowed himself a faint grin. "You learn fast for someone suspended in a net a few minutes ago." A new wave of drones appeared, their sensors sharper, faster. Ethan adjusted wiring and energy flows, creating overlapping decoy signatures. Sparks danced across the canyon like fireflies. The drones paused, faltered, and then collided, scanning each phantom as if confused by invisible prey. "Your species is infuriating," Sarah said, voice low but tinged with awe. "Yet effective, perhaps. Humans are more dangerous than I was warned." Ethan chuckled quietly. "We survive because we think, not because we're strong. Kindness, ingenuity, improvisation are real weapons." The patrol ship loomed closer, engines roaring. The canyon shook as its shadow passed overhead. Ethan sent a final pulse through the net, and the remaining drones faltered, caught in a cascade of false signals. Sparks showered the floor, lighting the canyon like a miniature storm. "Almost done," Ethan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We just need one final step." He pressed a key, redirecting the ship's sensors back toward decoy energy fields. The drones followed, leaving the canyon floor temporarily clear. Sarah crouched, tail coiled. "Your gamble has worked, but the commander will arrive. Your ingenuity will face the ultimate test." Ethan nodded. "I know, and I hope trust holds us together." The ship's engines roared louder, descending for inspection. The Vulpine commander's voice echoed through the canyon, metallic and commanding. Human, Vulpine, your actions cannot go unnoticed. Step forward. Sarah's ears twitched. The leader arrives, she whispered, amber eyes blazing. We face judgment, prepare yourself, human. Ethan straightened, pulse hammering. We face it together. The commander's shadow loomed over them, colossal and threatening, yet Ethan's hands remained steady on the console. Sparks flew around them. Sarah's claws glinted. The canyon had become a theater of improvisation, trust, and ingenuity. The commander stepped closer, scanning, eyes sharp. You dare defy the patrol, human? You dare manipulate my sensors, endanger my people. Ethan held his ground. I didn't trap her intentionally, but I also didn't flee, because sometimes survival requires cooperation, trust, and intelligence, not just strength and obedience. Sarah stepped forward, tail coiled, muscles tense but confident. He acts differently than your reports suggested. Perhaps there is merit in his approach. Strength does not always reside in teeth and claws. The commander's eyes narrowed. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Ethan and Sarah had no weapons other than ingenuity, strategy, and the fragile trust between them. And then, together, Human and Vulpine activated the final pulse, cascading energy through the canyon. The patrol ship's sensors faltered, alarms blared, and the drones collided, immobilized by the overlapping signals. Sparks erupted in showers across the canyon floor. Ethan exhaled, leaning back slightly. Sometimes kindness, trust, and ingenuity are the sharpest weapons in the galaxy. Sarah's tail flicked slowly, almost in approval. Perhaps your species has more to teach us than I believed. Danger and yet ingenuity, compassion, risk, survival. The Vulpine commander stood frozen, evaluating, calculating. For the first time, Human and Vulpine faced each other not as hunter and prey, but as equals in the heart of a storm, bound by necessity, trust, and the fragile bridge of understanding they had built. And the canyon, scarred by sparks and deception, held its breath as the first test of their alliance came to a precarious, electrifying conclusion. The canyon was quiet now, the hum of the disabled patrol ship fatting into the distance. The broken drones lay scattered across the jagged sand like fallen insects. Sparks still crackled from the energy net, painting flickering shadows on the canyon walls, but Ethan and Sarah were alive. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself a deep breath. The tension that had gripped his chest for 3 years, ever since he had arrived on Barren, eased just slightly. Sarah landed lightly on the canyon floor, tail coiling behind her, ears flattened but not aggressively so. Her amber eyes glimmered with the reflection of sparks and dying energy pulses. She studied Ethan carefully, muscles coiled but expression unreadable. You risked everything, she said finally. Not for orders, not for honor, not for survival alone, but for me, and for this fragile alliance. Ethan wiped a smear of sweat and dust from his brow. I didn't catch you to harm you, he said simply. I caught you by accident, but now we survive together. And sometimes surviving together means making choices that seem impossible. Her tail twitched almost imperceptibly, a subtle display of acknowledgement. Impossible choices are familiar to me, yet you do not behave as I expected from your species. Most humans would flee or strike. You improvise, adapt, and trust. Trust is dangerous, Ethan admitted. But sometimes it's the only way to make it through a canyon full of predators, and sometimes it's the only way to survive yourself. He gestured toward the smoldering canyon floor, toward the scattered drones. We survived because we worked together even if neither of us fully understood the other. That's humanity, I guess. Adapt, improvise, survive. Sarah's amber eyes softened slightly, a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. And yet, I do not feel fear of you, only curiosity, perhaps even respect. Her tail twitched again, curling near Ethan's boots in an almost casual acknowledgement of their partnership. Ethan allowed himself a faint smile, though the adrenaline still throbbed in his veins. Respect is mutual, he said, even if you have claws that could tear me apart in seconds. He looked down at Captain Caffeine, perched loyally on the console. Even you would approve, right? The Vulpine patrol ship hovered silently in the distance now, engines idle. Its commander had scanned the canyon, evaluating the scene, observing that the humans and Vulpine in the canyon were unharmed and cooperative. Communication channels opened, a voice resonating in the canyon, metallic and commanding. Human Vulpine, your actions cannot go unnoticed, but your ingenuity and cooperation, temporary perhaps, are acknowledged. Barren will remain neutral for now. Sarah's ears twitched and she exhaled in relief, tail flicking lightly. The leader recognizes the outcome, not fully but sufficiently to prevent immediate attack. Fragile truce made possible by your choices, human. Ethan nodded. Sometimes kindness and ingenuity can be stronger than teeth and claws, he said softly. Sometimes doing the unexpected saves more lives than following the rules. For the first time since the net had trapped her, Sarah allowed herself to relax fully. She lowered her tail slightly, coiling it closer, and crouched on the canyon floor. Her gaze lingered on Ethan, studying the lines of his face, the dirt and sweat on his uniform, the determination in his stance. I see now that humans can survive not by force but by cunning and compassion, dangerous and fascinating. Ethan chuckled softly, glancing at the net. You survived because of a few sparks, some wires, and a lot of improvisation, and because I offered a cup of tea. She blinked at him, faint amusement in her amber eyes. Tea as a weapon or as comfort? Both, Ethan said, grinning. Depends on who's drinking it. A soft wind drifted through the canyon, stirring the glassy sand. For a moment it was just the two of them, human and vulpine, allies in a canyon scarred by sparks and deception. No orders, no threats, no machines of war. Just trust, fragile but present. You risked everything for someone you barely knew, Sarah said after a pause, her voice quieter now, more reflective. Most humans would have escaped alone, yet you stayed. I stayed because I had to, Ethan said simply. Because sometimes survival isn't about winning or losing. It's about making sure the person next to you lives too. And sometimes it's about making the world a little better, even if only for a moment. Her tail flicked softly, the gesture delicate but deliberate. Perhaps your species is capable of more than destruction. Perhaps you understand something my people do not, that compassion and ingenuity can be mightier than claws and tradition. Ethan nodded. We're not perfect, we make mistakes. We improvise, we fail, we learn, but sometimes kindness is the sharpest weapon we have. The distant rumble of Barron's wind filled the canyon. Ethan glanced at the horizon, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows over the jagged rocks. It's not over yet, he said. We survived this night, but the world is bigger than this canyon. There will be other challenges, other predators. Sarah's gaze softened. Then perhaps we have learned a lesson tonight, that trust, courage, and ingenuity can bridge the divide between species, and that even a human, reckless and curious, can be a companion rather than a predator. Ethan allowed himself a small laugh. Companion, I like the sound of that. For a long moment they sat in silence. The sparks from the net hissed and died down. The canyon walls glimmered in the fatting light, reflecting the strange, fragile alliance forged in the heat of improvisation, danger, and trust. Finally, Sarah rose gracefully, tail curling in a deliberate arc. She regarded Ethan one last time, amber eyes studying every detail of his face. You caught me by accident, she said softly. And yet, your choices turned a trap into survival. Your mistakes are more dangerous than your weapons. Ethan grinned, exhaustion pulling at his features. Then I'll take that as a compliment, and next time I promise I'll bring tea, stronger than before. Sarah allowed herself a small, musical laugh, a sound between a growl and a giggle. I will expect it. She moved toward her ship, pausing at the ramp. Your species, you are unpredictable, but you are worthy of respect. Ethan stepped forward, holding out a hand, a silent offer of companionship. She considered it, amber eyes softening, before flicking her tail once and curling it lightly around his wrist. A gesture older than language, a symbol of trust and acknowledgement. You know, Ethan said quietly, sometimes I think the universe puts us in impossible situations just to see what we do with them. Sarah's ears flicked, a faint glimmer of a smile in her gaze. Perhaps, and perhaps your species has a way of surprising even those who are trained to fear and hunt. The engines of her ship roared to life, stirring dust and sand into the twilight. She lingered, giving one last glance toward Ethan before stepping aboard. The hatch closed and the ship rose into the sky, leaving the canyon quiet once more. Ethan watched it disappear into the horizon, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. The net lay still, the canyon scarred by sparks and the chaos of survival. Captain Caffeine remained on the console, silent as ever. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Well, he murmured, I think I got trapped too. The wind carried the faint scent of copper fur, a reminder that the night on Barron had changed everything. Not just the physical landscape, but the landscape of trust, of understanding, and of hope. Ethan crouched beside the console, sipping what remained of his tea, and allowed himself the smallest, rarest smile he had worn in years. Survival had never tasted so strange or so sweet. Because sometimes, he realized, the greatest victories were not over predators, machines, or even enemies, but over fear, isolation, and the limitations of one's own species. And sometimes, the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was simply kindness.